Good, so thanks to everybody for coming here. You all know me. I'm Marcus Miller, director of the Gordon Snelgrove Gallery. I want to remind everybody that we're on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis. I'm really happy I'm going to introduce Wayne just very briefly, and I think most of you are familiar with Wayne. He's the rock star around here, curator. Is this me? Up until, when was it that you were in Alberta, that you were director curator of Alberta? 2015. And since then you've been, Wayne has been an independent curator involved in all kinds of projects. I think from my point of view, Wayne kind of made his name when he was in Winnipeg at Plug-In, where he turned that into an ICA, and he championed the Royal Art Lodge amongst many other artists there. He curated more recently Theo Sims' Kandahar, which was at the Mackenzie Gallery a couple of years ago. That was a very impressive work of art. He curated Janet Cardiff, George Burrs Miller at the Paradise Institute with John Tupper for the Canadian Pavilion at the Venice Biennial in 2001. He's worked with Gabriel Garcia Luna here, and Blake Little, who he will introduce later, Zachary Logan, amongst many, many other things. He's written for Black Flash, Art and Text, Border Crossings, Parquet, Art on Paper, C Magazine, amongst many, many other things. And also, just one last mention here, Wayne was the curator of the 2016 Nuit Blanche here in Saskatoon. Wayne, I get you.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to thank a few people and institutions. Marcus, thank you for having us here and organizing this, certainly. Jeremy Morgan and Leah Taylor from the University Art Galleries. Thank you for coming, and thank you for all your support to make this happen. Sort of a mini residency that you'll hear a little more about, which has been really great. Gary Vero from Queer City Cinema, very helpful, and the Sask Arts Board has been helpful in this process. Jennifer Crane has been really helpful in organizing us and allowing us to invade her space, the photo studio space, to really develop a body of work that we were really excited about. And all the MFA students and undergrad students that have been with us in the studio off and on and watching the creative process. Also Amanda Guthrie from Out Saskatoon. Are you here? No. Okay. But Out Saskatoon has been important in the casting call that we will introduce to you around one particular project shortly. So I think I've covered everything, hopefully. But yeah, we can begin. What we found out, we gave a talk at the University of Regina last week, and I kind of realized in the introduction that Blake sort of introduces himself through the making of his work. He gives sort of a bio as he goes along, so I think we'll just
skip the intro.
Skip the intro. Yeah, exactly. We'll get started. He has about 100 images here to go through. And then we'll really quickly, at the end of this hour, focus on the body of work that is in production right now here at the university and goes on throughout the rest of the year. So maybe you start, Blake.
Well, I want to thank Jennifer and Wayne personally for all your help for the last 3 days. So I'm going to go through sort of a timeline of my career, and then we can, if you guys have questions throughout, I want to make it very informal. There's not many people here, and we can just make a conversation. But I'm going to go through my work, and as we're going along, you guys can ask questions. And at the end, Wayne and I are going to have a little conversation about the work.
Because one thing I would note too, especially because we're in the academy here, that Blake comes from the commercial image making world, which is different from the conceptual art and art photography world. So a little bit a different orientation to the making of images, different considerations, primarily coming out of the background in Hollywood and all of the sort of guidelines, I suppose, that Hollywood brings with it in a very general way. And part of this project is coming to terms with representation of this sort. And I just find it very interesting that you'll see the building of beauty, the building of a great image, the building of something truthful in terms of portraiture that we're debating and working through right now. So that's one thing I want to say. Attempted to. Yeah.
Because when I moved to LA, I didn't come there, oh, I'm going to be a celebrity photographer. I wanted to be a portrait photographer. But so out of proximity, I became a celebrity photographer.
Yeah.
But I'll start.
Yeah.
So I'm a fine art and commercial portrait photographer based in LA. I've always made it a priority to maintain and preserve the integrity of my work as an artist, regardless of the type of work I'm doing. I've always had my own art projects and always carried those out throughout my commercial career. And I think by doing that, maintain both the longevity and the quality of my work. And I actually think that by practicing my own fine art practice and having those projects actually helped keep my commercial work vibrant and changing and moving forward. And my work process is kind of the same, whether I'm doing, regardless of who I'm photographing, I have a similar process, whether it's a celebrity or someone just from the street. Before the projects, I always have a concept or an idea, or several concepts or ideas that I try to carry out through the shoot. And sometimes those things change and vary, but I always have an idea and a place where I'm going in a direction I'm going. And especially with commercial work, that really helps to make sure that I get the job done and get that strong image, even when I may have a really short time frame in which to do it. So this is my first series that I did when I grew up in Seattle, and I went to Seattle Central College, and I moved to LA in 1981, and I got involved with the art scene, the LA art scene, through friends, and through that I started photographing painters and sculptors and artists that I met in LA. And these are some of the people from the 80s that I met and photographed. And through that I built my first portfolio of portraits. And you guys might recognize some Ed Richey, well-known California and American artist, Don McCarty. So I didn't really have an art school background. I went to school at Seattle Central College, and I learned a lot of technique. But when I moved to LA, I really got involved in art and learned through going to museums, through research, and through that. This is Cary Marshall. He just had a big retrospective in New York. John Sansini. And through John, I met a photographer, Bonnie Schiffman, and I started working for Bonnie a lot and doing her lighting. She worked for Rolling Stone and other magazines, and through her, I was introduced to the film, television, and music world. And so I was doing her lighting and working with her on those projects. John Baldessari, prominent California artist. Chris Burton. And so with this portfolio, I met art directors and I started showing the artist portfolio. And I met one art director who had he was the art director for a bunch of magazines. And including that, with those magazines, was Moviegoer. And I got my first big break working for Moviegoer. And Moviegoer was a free publication, like a fan magazine that they gave out at the theaters. And but it was a fully produced publication, and all the shoots for the publication were original and assigned. So I started working for Moviegoer. And through that, that was kind of my big break, groundbreaking photo shoot. I got a New York rep to help get me work in other magazines and also in the advertising world, and also a stock agent that resold my pictures. So when I do a photo shoot with a celebrity, I'd send the pictures afterwards to my agent, and they would resell the pictures all over the world. So all the magazines in the world that are like that want celebrity images could get the images through the stock agent. This is one of my first shoots for Time magazine. And a lot of times, these aren't the pictures that the magazine used, but these were my favorite images. Vince Vaughn for Parade magazine. And as when I did celebrity shoots, I'd always try to push the boundaries a little bit. And this I actually shot for myself. It's on 4x5 Polaroid negative. So it's a Polaroid with a 4x5 negative. And this was an editorial shoot for Playboy magazine. But through this job, I got along well with Steve Carell, and I knew the Get Smart movie was coming out, and I rented the car and designed the shoot all around that concept. And through that, I was able to get the movie poster job. So from the editorial job and meeting Steve and working well with him, I got this job. And the previous image is actually from the shoot for that poster.
Sorry, you mentioned that, you come with a fixed idea or with a certain idea, that you want to execute. For example, in this case, you know the person, or you have researched from the artist or
Yes,
the person before, and you look for a gesture, you look for an expression. How does that translate?
Well, with a celebrity shoot, I have a concept. Like, okay, I'm going to shoot on this colored background. Or sometimes I build a set, simple set. Or I have a prop or a chair. And then in my mind, I think about how I might pose them. And a lot of this I write down in lists. And I usually never even go back to it, but it's sort of in my brain. And all those ideas and concepts and the history of how I've researched it and just my previous shooting and how I might imagine shooting, that person kind of comes out organically as I'm doing it. But with a celebrity shoot, I don't have that. A lot of times I don't have that much time with them, so everything's pre-lit. So if this was my studio, I'd have one set up over here, one set up over here, one set up over here, and I have one or two assistants and a digital tech, and the lighting's already sort of pre-lit. So when the person comes, they step in, and I do a few tests with them, and I start shooting. So things might change. I might, if I'm in a natural light studio, if I have an extra minute and I feel like I finished it, I might just take the person over towards the window and do a quick picture and then move on. But a lot of times with entertainment people, it's a limited time. So
I still think there's this performative aspect, and some of the students who sat in on the shooting sessions saw how Blake works a model around in a very quick way to maybe shoot 200 images in order to get that precise look.
Like, for instance, yesterday, the project I'm doing is called Fluid, and it's photographing transgender, non-binary, and gender-fluid people. And the last person that we photographed, they look just like anybody. So I'm trying, and she was beautiful. So I'm trying to, part of me is like taking these beautiful sort of Vogue magazine or fashion kind of pictures, and then but at the same time I'm trying to bring out, like, that's not the project I'm doing. Like, I'm trying to make an image that fits with the project. So I keep working and working and working with how I'm posing them, how I changed her hair, or their hair, and eventually I get to the point where I have an image that I'm pleased with, that works for what I'm doing. That's kind of specific to this project, but I actually want to make it more real, make it less beautiful, less, but also the way in the end I changed her hair, and I felt like that, just that change in the way that I posed them made it work fit in with the project. But throughout the beginning of it, I kept shooting and thinking like, oh, these pictures are too pretty. They look like something from Vanity Fair or something, but not in the right way, in a fashion way or something.
We don't have our lighting maestro here as well. Ron Gibson has been here with us from Los Angeles and has worked with Blake for a number of years. And their sort of symbiotic relationship in defining that great image is really an interesting performative process. And then E was around to ruffle hair in a certain way. I mean, it's a collaborative process, and some of the students that got to see this, I think, was a great thing.
Yeah, so I work with a lighting person, and I worked with, I hired Ram for the first part of this Fluid project, which I did in LA, in my garage. And I have other assistants that I work with as well, but Ram was totally fascinated into the project. And I start the project, I start shooting, we get to a basic lighting. But as I'm shooting, Ram's changing the light, and I'm moving, and he's moving. And it's like this little sort of dance we have to get to the, he's like tweaking the light just subtly, and things that you might not even notice what he's doing, but the subtle differences. And it's been really great working with someone like that who's invested in the project as much as I'm invested, like he's really into it. And he works with some of the best photographers in the US and Europe. I feel like he's into the project. If he thinks the work's good, then I know it's good. So.
How did you make out with Mike Myers here?
Well, I did both of the first two Austin Powers movies, and we got along really well. But I did a lot of movie work for New Line Cinema. Like I also did the Dumb and Dumber poster and some other things. So, but through the editorial work, you know, from the previous work, I would get movie work. Both by connecting with the actor and also sometimes with the art directors. This is one of my favorite celebrity portraits, female celebrity portraits. I did this parade cover shoot with Julianne Moore in New York. Los Angeles Magazine. This was an advertising job He was a spokesperson for Sirius Radio. And for a number, about 4 or 5 years, I did a lot of work for ESPN magazine. So that's how I think I came about getting this job. Another shoot in New York. This was for the Advocate magazine, gay magazine. And Johnny brought his own sailor suit. This is a more recent shoot for the London Times magazine, and through this job, I got along really well with Jane and did her book cover. I try to create very iconic or memorable pictures, and I think this is a really successful defining portrait of Jack Black. In fact, he's used it several times for publicity pictures.
Do you work with a specific editor for the post-production side of it, or is it an editor that comes with the project, like with the magazine, for example? Or
Yeah, with the magazine project, I edited the pictures down to maybe anywhere from 20 to 100 pictures, depending on how many I've shot. And then I send those JPEGs to the editor, and then they pick the pictures.
right, but in terms of like, say, retouching and things like that, do you do that?
I do most of it myself.
Yeah.
I've learned through Photoshop. If it's something really tricky, or if it's layering of images, I don't do as much of it. But for instance, on the movie posters, that's all done by the ad agency.
Right, yeah.
And I worked for a lot of mainstream kind of magazines, and during those shoots, I always try to do something more stronger or more like this versus this. Trying to cover my bases in terms of the type of pictures I'm doing. So that was like, this was a set I built for that shoot. Again, this was all planned around Superman to try to get him to sort of make it sporty and show his body. This is my first museum show that I had at the Idlesjord Museum in Indianapolis. In the 80s, I was actually involved with the gay rodeo and participated in the gay rodeo, and photographed this work basically because I take pictures of things that I'm doing and that are part of my life. And at the time, I never imagined that these would end up in a museum, but a friend of mine who I hadn't talked to in a number of years, he was a screenwriter and a historian, started doing a history of LGBT people in the West, a history of that's sort of been buried. So he was creating a history of gays and lesbians in Western culture, in the Western history. And so he came to me and said, "Oh, I remember your pictures from the 80s. This was like, this show was in 2014. So he came to me in like 2012 and said, "Oh, I remember your pictures of the gay rodeo." And he came and we looked at them, and they were actually in a file cabinet. I hadn't looked at them for many years. And we edited them. He presented them to the Idlesjord Museum, and they gave me a show there, and that's how this came about. But when I look back on it now, I'm probably the only one that really documented the gay rodeo. And I wasn't even, intending to for any purpose. I was just taking the pictures because they're this part of my life and what I do. But so some of them are 35 millimeter action pictures, and then some are set up portraits with a 2 1/4 Hasselblad. And because I was participating in a lot of these people, guys were my friends, and I had complete access to be behind the scenes, behind the shoots, and anywhere I wanted to photograph. And the people sort of knew me, so it really gave me a lot of freedom to take the pictures I wanted to. And I also did some work in the studio. I was really influenced by Kurt Marcus, who was a cowboy photographer at the time. That was the rodeo team in my studio. I think that was like 1990. Yeah.
Can you identify yourself in the group shot?
On the bottom on the left.
On the left, right.
And this work I started in 2005. I wanted to show an alternative to the gay stereotype for men. And I think people's impression and range of who they realize of who's gay or straight or whatever has changed a lot. But at the time, it was important to me to show an alternative to the gay stereotype for men. And this is also, this is my first self-published book. I have 4 books that I self-published. And I have photographed these pictures throughout the U.S. and also in Canada as well. And this project, this New West project, was the first project I did with Wayne in Alberta. And Wayne and I met because I went to ACAD to do a lecture there and talk to the students. And I met Wayne, and we have a history and backgrounds in Western culture and appreciation for cowboys and all of that. And Wayne asked me to come back, and we did this project in Alberta for 9 days, photographing cowboys, pro cowboys, and working cowboys in Western culture.
And cowgirls.
And cowgirls. So this was all in and around Calgary. And so we would walk around and find people to photograph. This was at a small rodeo. have this person in a small rodeo. That was Pinocchio.
Can you say anything about how you meet people? What's your approach to people? Like, how do you establish relations with your subjects?
I mean, with these people?
Yeah.
It depends on who they were. Like the PRCA professional cowboys and cowgirls just came and I had photographed them for like 10 minutes.
But also, I could say that Brian Doherty, who was at the Southern Alberta Gallery, comes from a ranching background. So he introduced us to Glenn Hall, who's a local rancher around Staveley. And those sort of introductions are needed to get onto the bigger ranches, the Cross Ranch, for example, which is one of the big four that started the Calgary Stampede. So those sort of introductions to the traditional ranching families and to sort of give that sort of vote of confidence to the project is really necessary. So that's another side of it. That more formal introductions, being able to stay on their properties. If you've ever worked out in the country, people don't necessarily keep a timetable for your sake. If they have something else to do, they're not going to show up at 4 o'clock. So having that sort of introduction through Ryan and through the halls really changed things and allowed us to schedule a little bit more. But otherwise, yeah, there were
and also with the
people.
Fluid project that we're doing, we're working with Dr. Aaron DeVore, who's the head of transgender studies at the University of Victoria. So that's really helping as legitimize the project and helping people be confident and not suspect of what we're doing. But I think you're asking more about like how I work with people.
Well, kind of, but both. And it's interesting to hear you talk about this because, I mean, taking portraits of people, I'm imagining is all about sort of confidence, right? That they have to trust what you're doing, right?
I think as I work with the person, I get more and more confidence with them. And they can sometimes, not always, but they'll see what I'm doing they'll see some of the images I'm making of them, and that helps us reassure them. But I work in a really low-key way, and other than just doing it, I don't know how, like people always say, oh, how do you make people comfortable? I just do it. I've done it for so long, and but my approach is very low-key and relaxed. But at the same time, I direct the people my subjects very specifically. I don't have them stand in front of the camera and say, okay, do something. I work with them. I know how I want to start. And then I let them respond to what I do or how I pose them, but it's very specific. And I just keep working with them and keep shooting and working until I get to a place where I feel like I've created a strong image of them, and I can hopefully a memorable image of them. So with this project, we did location portraits, and then we set up a natural light studio with the background. And I had an assistant as well on this who's helping me do the lighting and set up the whole natural light studio. But with this, we had no lights. We would set up the backdrop in the right position and had, flagging off and controlling the light. Whereas with the Fluid project, we're in the studio with four or five different lights in the studio environment. this is the second book that I published. I have a following of in the gay world that follows my work and buys my work and buy books. So I think it's interesting as an artist, you can, with the internet, and that you really can have a niche audience and celebrate that audience and be successful in that world, whatever that is. And this is my preservation series. I'm probably most well known for this work. It went viral on the internet at the time that I had my show, and I have a gallery in Los Angeles, the Paul Copaken Gallery, and I had a show there in 2015 with this work. And this was all done in the studio. One important or interesting thing is I did a making of video of this, and I think it's really important with your art projects to do video to promote your work. And without that video, I don't think the work would have gone viral, and people would have, because it literally was. It started with some press in some really good art blogs, and then People Magazine and Fast Company found it and published it online, and then through that, every country in the world started contacting me and wanting to publish something about this work. But without that video and people being able to see the process of how it was done, I don't think it would have had as much success as it did.
Can you explain that process a little bit? Can you explain the process a little bit that would have been shown in the video?
Oh, I mean how I did it?
Yeah.
So there's a platform that's raised like 2 feet above the ground, and I just figured this all out through the process of experimenting. And for this project, I photographed. It's very involved, so I have to set up a studio, cover the place completely in plastic. I have a crew of 4 or 5 people. There's 2 people just pouring the honey on the subject. But so there's a platform, there's a trough that I built with a drain in it in the middle. And the 2 platforms come like this, support the trough, and then the drain comes down. And then inside of the trough is a platform with 4 legs, and it's smaller than the trough. And the honey's poured, and the subject stands or sits there, and the honey's poured on them, goes off the trough off the platform into the trough and into the drain, and we just keep pouring it in. And the people that work with me keep pouring it as I'm shooting, and I keep directing them and direct the subject.
Is it difficult for the subject to breathe during that process?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's also part of the process of that. I feel like that tension and that response, because some people were very zen about it, other people freaked out.
How was the baby handled?
Well, we didn't get any honey on the baby's face. That's why his face was red. The baby had fun. Like, I have pictures of the baby.
Oh no, I was just interested in the face and
Yeah. But that picture is actually one of my favorite images from these two. Pick this one, and are two of my favorites from the whole series.
So are you close to a shower facility?
Yeah, I have to have a shower. Yeah. Shower in the studio. Gotta have a shower. Yeah,
It really-
there's a shower.
It really feels like a being born process.
Yeah. Well, I felt like that the subject looked like they're preserved, and I wanted to show all of humanity. So that's why I did the baby all the way to an 86-year-old woman. So I wanted to like preserve humanity and document. But I also think you asked about like, oh, how do people react? Capturing the way they react to me is also, I kind of see them as portraits, because how they react to the experience is part of who they are and a kind of a representation of who they are. So, like, you can see her personality in this picture. It's still a portrait of her. And even a portrait of her.